Hi everyone, meteorologist Brian Bennett here with the very latest on Hurricane Dorian for your Friday morning. Here's the state of Florida right here. Here's Dorian. And Dorian right now is a Cat 2 hurricane as of this recording. 1 more mile per hour wind when we go from 110 miles per hour, which it currently is, to 111 miles per hour. Then we're going to have a Cat 3 hurricane, and that'll very likely be happening on your Friday afternoon. All right, so there's the storm. Let's take a closer look at it and see what's going on with the storm. First of all, it looks like we are still encountering a bit of wind shear on the southern side of the storm. Uh, Overnight, some of that wind shear did look to kind of dissipate a little bit, allowing the storm to have a bit more of a symmetrical and spherical shape here, but still a bit of wind shear. As the storm moves farther westward, I think we'll get out of that wind shear environment, allowing the storm to look much more symmetric and to continue to increase. You can see the eye wall looked really impressive overnight. Over the last couple of frames, the eye wall might have weakened just a tiny bit, but that's perfectly normal with hurricanes. We're going to see it recycle and form possibly an even stronger eye wall once the storm continues to tug off to the west. The center of circulation right about there. We don't have a defined eye in the storm quite yet where we can see through the storm. But again, as we get away from this wind shear environment, move into very warm waters of the Bahamas, I think we're going to see the storm really look like the beast that it's going to be as it makes landfall on the east coast of Florida. Again, right now, winds 110 miles per hour, 1 more mile per hour, and we'll have a Cat 3 hurricane on our hands. And that's, again, very likely going to happen today, and very possibly, and very likely, actually, going to be a Cat 4 when it makes landfall on the east coast of Florida, which, by the way, we haven't had a Cat 4 or stronger hurricane on the east coast of Florida in quite a long time. All right, so here's a storm right here. Latest from the National Hurricane Center, 110 mile per hour winds moving to the northwest at 12 miles per hour. Pretty high confidence. The storm is going to head for the northern Bahamas. So this is pretty much written in stone at this point that this is going to happen. But then there is a little bit of uncertainty about exactly how far north or south it will make landfall. And I'm going to try to hash that out for you here by looking at some of the computer models and using some of my previous experience from other hurricanes to try to figure out where this storm will be heading. But here's the latest from the Hurricane Center. Again, most likely making landfall somewhere east of Lake Okeechobee, which would be West Palm Beach, perhaps even as far north as Vero Beach. Really, anybody here on the east coast of Florida does need to be paying pretty close attention to this storm, as it will be a beast with winds possibly blowing around 140 miles per hour. It's then going to take a turn to the north. That turn to the north is a bit difficult to forecast, so the exact impact on Tampa Bay is a challenging one at this time, as you're on the west coast, so exactly how quickly that northerly turn occurs will obviously impact the weather conditions in Tampa Bay. Here's the latest from the Hurricane Center, and you can see they're expecting it to make landfall late Labor Day evening into early Tuesday morning. So late Monday and a Tuesday morning is when the Hurricane Center is expecting landfall to occur. And again, a big cone of uncertainty here. The line, which we shouldn't always focus on the line, but the line has it making landfall perhaps somewhere around the West Palm Beach area. But again, look at the cone of uncertainty as well, just to know that we are looking at still the possibility of the storm making landfall farther north or even a bit farther south. All right, so that's the landfall. And then let's take a look at this inland location. So by the time it reaches the latitude of Lakeland, perhaps even into parts of Polk County, we're looking at winds blowing still hurricane force around 75 miles per hour, possibly gusting to around 90 miles per hour. So some very strong winds possible in inland Florida and all the way up through the spine of the state. That includes Orlando and areas north as that storm continues to drift off to the north. All right, let me drop some quick meteorology on you here just to kind of show you what's happening and show you what is not going to happen and what therefore is more likely to happen. So first of all, we're looking at a chart here called the 500 millibar geopotential height. Yeah, a lot of meteorology mumbo jumbo. What I want you to see from this is that the orange color here represents high pressure, and here's Dorian right here. So is there any chance that Dorian is going to say, you know what? I'm going to be nice, Florida. I'm not going to come towards you. I'm going to go straight north and stay a storm for the fishes. No, that's not going to happen. And the reason that's not going to happen, unfortunately, is this high pressure is going to build in and act as a blocking high. It's also going to steer it towards the state of Florida. So the storm is not going to go north. It is going to head towards Florida and exactly where it makes landfall here in Florida, or even a slight chance that it could scrape the coast of Florida and make a potential first or second landfall in the Carolinas is a possibility, something that we can't completely rule out. But regardless, that high pressure is going to keep the storm from moving due north. Instead, it's going to make it head towards the state of Florida. We do get a bit of a gap in the high pressure, though, which could allow the storm to want to drift to the north a little bit. But to kind of complicate factors a little bit, higher up in the atmosphere at 200 millibars, we have a high pressure that's going to develop over the northern part of Florida, and that is going to actually want to push the storm a little bit farther south. So, at different levels of the atmosphere, we have competing forces, which makes the storm even more difficult to try to forecast because the strength of those highs, any weaknesses in the high, will control any ability for this storm to try to drift to the north or south. So, with that said, I do feel like the models are finally starting to come together and agree a little bit more about the solution for the storm. So I'm feeling a little bit better about the accuracy of these models because they are starting to agree a bit more. And that's what we want to see. We want to see model agreement across the European and the American and the German models. And when we start to see that, that means we're honing in on a solution that is more likely to happen. So I want to show you three models that have been handling the storm pretty well. The European, the GFS, and the Wharf model. First of all, the European, which is normally a rock star. Yesterday, I feel like it kind of had an off day. It wasn't doing the greatest with the storm yesterday, but I feel like this latest solution is possibly closer to what may actually happen. So here we are. This is Monday morning and Monday afternoon, and you can clearly see Dorian targeting the east coast of Florida. And if you believe the European, it has it making landfall right around the West Palm Beach area. And what we're looking at here are wind gusts, and we're looking at wind gusts possibly of 110, 120 miles per hour, maybe 130 miles per hour, according to the European computer model. The storm then makes a turn to the north. Again, it finds that weakness and that high pressure, so it turns to the north. And this is a bit farther west than what the European had yesterday. Yesterday's European model run had it kind of riding the east coast a bit more. Today, a bit farther west. Obviously, the farther west it goes, and the later that turn north occurs, that means stronger winds for places like Tampa Bay. Obviously, as you head farther inland and closer to the storm, in places like Polk County, Hardy County, Highlands County, then you're looking at much stronger winds and a much greater impact from this storm than you would see in Tampa Bay, assuming this path prevails, which again will continue to fine tune the path as the storm approaches. But regardless, the European has a storm moving to the north and then having a big impact on Orlando and also on Jacksonville with wind gusts obviously still hurricane force and greater. The greatest wind impact obviously would be right where it makes landfall, and to the right part of the center of circulation would be the strongest winds. But that is a European computer model. Let's take a look at the GFS model here. And let me slide this down a little bit for you just so you can see it a little bit better. Uh, 1 second, let me slide that up. Okay, there we go. So here's the GFS model. This is the American model. And to be honest, normally I would place the American model as number two, but it's been pretty consistent for the most part in what's going to happen with this storm. By consistent, I mean down to several hundred miles. And one thing I do want to show you here is when we're trying to figure out what a model is thinking and what's happening in the atmosphere, one thing we can do is look at previous model runs. So this is a current model run which has the hurricane moving into possibly West Palm Beach area or areas just north, and that would happen later on Monday. So here we are late Monday evening, the storm possibly making landfall right around the West Palm Beach area. But if we go back and look at some previous models, here's a previous model run. The storm was a bit slower, so now the models are thinking that the storm could move a little bit quicker. Also, you notice, let's go back to a previous model. Okay, here's 12Z from yesterday morning. Notice it was farther north. Going back to the 6Z from the 29th, farther north. Going back farther north. So you see that over time, the models have been pushing the storm farther south. So trending is something that we can definitely uh, really help us forecast the storm. So we know that it's very, very unlikely that it's going to turn north and make a direct landfall somewhere up around Daytona Beach. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you live, it looks like it's going to make landfall more around West Palm Beach, Vero Beach, Jupiter area, at least based on these latest computer models. Again, the right quadrant of a hurricane is the worst part of a hurricane. That's where you get the onshore flow. This is where you get the largest risk for storm surge. This is usually where you get the heaviest rain. This is where you get the strongest winds. This is also where you get the most likely outlook for tornadoes. Yeah, we'll have tornadoes in some of the outer part of the eye wall, some of these outer rain bands that will move on shore. Tornadoes are much more likely in this northern or this right quadrant. So you want to be south of this. Still, the eye wall, very strong winds possible here, but again, better conditions to the south, worse conditions, quite a bit so as you head north of that center of circulation. So here's the GFS model. It has it making landfall again late Monday, possibly around the West Palm Beach area, or if not, just a tad north. And then the turn north is much slower than the European model is, to the point that it has more of an impact on Tampa Bay. So here we are Tuesday afternoon, and the GFS is saying that the Tampa Bay area, that includes Tampa and St. Petersburg, could have wind gusts reaching hurricane force wind gusts. So if that turn north doesn't happen quick like the European computer model run has, then we're looking at a much greater impact on Tampa Bay, even down to Cape Coral, and obviously areas north as well. In this case, Orlando still has a strong storm with hurricane force wind gust, and the GFS has a model eventually making that turn to the right. But really, this would be a pretty close to worst case scenario for the state of Florida, because almost the entire state would be encountering pretty close to hurricane force conditions. So obviously the brunt of the storm would be occurring down here where it makes landfall, but hurricane conditions would be possible across much of the state. So we'll have to see what happens with the GFS as we continue to see more runs. Here's a look at the H-Wharf model. H-Wharf is a very high resolution model. It's 3 kilometers, meaning it's going to pick up on potential weaknesses in that blocking high better than some of the other models would do. So it's definitely a model that we want to take a look at here. So here's the model, and here's the forecast for 10 a.m. Monday morning. That's where it has the storm. As it makes close landfall, this is late Monday evening, and the winds are blowing possibly up to 130, 140 miles per hour. So yeah, this model agrees with the Hurricane Center that we could be dealing with a Cat 4 hurricane making landfall. And again, it kind of agrees, the same general location, possibly Vero Beach, Jupiter, maybe as far south as parts of West Palm Beach. But exactly where you are, north or south of the center of circulation, is going to make a huge difference. If you were watching Hurricane Michael when it hit the Panhandle last year, then you'll remember Mexico Beach, which was on the northern side or the right quadrant, got hammered so much worse with storm surge than places like Panama City. Not to underestimate what the damage Panama City had, but Panama City didn't have the storm surge or the winds that locations to the right part of that storm had. So exact landfall is very important, and right now it does look like it's going to be in this general vicinity here, which would be, again, around the Vero Beach, Jupiter, down to West Palm Beach location. But again, everybody up and down the coast should be watching this storm closely. All right, so the storm moves inland, very strong winds, obviously, very heavy rain, and the H-Warp actually has the storm making a turn to the north a bit quicker than the GFS does. So what does that mean for Tampa Bay? If you live in Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, it would mean wind gust possibly to 50, 60 miles per hour. But if you head inland to parts of Polk County, Highlands County, then you would be seeing stronger wind gusts, possibly on the order of hurricane force wind gust, obviously, as you're pretty close to what was a Cat 4 hurricane, still hurricane status as you get up into the middle part of the state here, as it's still tapping into some of the water vapor and instability from the Atlantic and also from the Gulf of Mexico. Orlando obviously being hard hit by the storm as it moves off to the north, and the H Wharf has a storm continuing to move right up the spine of the state and move to the north. And again, the Carolinas, you'll need to keep an eye on this as well, just in case it happens to make a turn more to the north and gives you some really rough conditions in South Carolina and maybe even North Carolina as well. So don't think that you're completely out of the woods there yet either. So as I mentioned, overall progression has been for the storm to uh, move slower. That is, slower means a longer time period of very strong winds. That means a longer time period of storm surge, and obviously it means longer time period of heavy rain. This latest model run did have the storm speeding up a little bit, but still, you see the type of winds, excuse me, the type of rain we could be expecting from this storm. The model, in this case, the GFS, is predicting well over a foot of rain. That includes West Palm Beach, that includes areas around Lake Okeechobee, that gets up into parts of Highlands, Hardy, DeSoto, Polk County, even up into Sumter County. We could be seeing well over a foot of rain. This model is forecasting 4 to 5 inches for parts of Tampa and St. Petersburg. Keep in mind that just takes a little bit of a wiggle to the west, and then we're seeing a lot heavier rainfall totals for parts of coastal Tampa Bay. Again, we go to the east, and we're looking at more rain in parts of Melbourne area. So we'll have to iron out the exact details, but right now this is what the model is calling for. The potential for up to 20 inches of rain where the center of circulation happens to move across the state. So we're not playing around with saltwater, storm surge risk, or inland flooding. Both are very real risk with this storm. Again, here's the latest look of the storm on satellite imagery. And that's kind of the latest forecast conditions. All right, so I'm going to give you some of my 2 cents on this. Again, please use the National Hurricane Center and your local officials for evacuation advice and for the latest to do with this storm. But based on the latest computer models, right now the landfall location is kind of honing in on West Palm Beach, Jupiter, Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce, and Vero Beach kind of being the most likely area here for a potential landfall. Keep in mind that areas to the north of that center of circulation would encounter the worst conditions with storm surge, also winds and tornadoes on the northern side of that center of circulation. The storm moves inland, possibly moves near Okeechobee. So if you live anywhere from, I'd say, north of Delray Beach, West Palm Beach, Jupiter, Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce, Vero Beach, maybe even as far north as Palm Bay, you need to very strongly consider evacuating and evacuating soon. Where do you evacuate to? I think you would be good moving inland because you would be moving away from the potential storm surge risk and you'd be getting away from the very strongest winds the storm has to offer. Now, not to say if you come over to Tampa or Sarasota or even Fort Myers that you couldn't encounter some strong winds. You could encounter hurricane force winds, but you wouldn't be looking at the 140-mile-per-hour wind gusts. It's going to be beating up the east coast of Florida. So you can evacuate inland. You can also evacuate north. If you live in any non-permanent housing, like a mobile home, please do evacuate. If you live anywhere in this zone, Melbourne down to West Palm Beach, even areas inland, if you're in non-permanent housing, please seek out permanent brick style housing or a hotel farther inland, or even in your same town. Okeechobee, if you're in a mobile home, consider getting a hotel room just for a night or two to get you into some more safe housing. Okay? All right, so the most direct hit is going to be here on the east coast of Florida. And again, this storm could wobble south or north, so stay tuned for changing conditions. Now, if you live in Tampa Bay, Tampa, St. Petersburg, consider maybe trimming some of those low branches that look kind of weak hanging over your house. Put away any type of lawn umbrellas or anything that could blow around in the storm. Lakeland, areas inland could see stronger winds, so same thing goes there. And Orlando, you could be seeing some very strong wind conditions as well. So go ahead and prepare everything around your house. Power could go out. Trees could fall on power lines. So I suggest being prepared for the power to go out. So have some fresh water to drink. So go and grab some bottled waters from the store if you still can. Some non-perishable food. So especially areas on the East Coast, you should be planning on potentially not having assistance for 3 days. That's kind of the rule of thumb. If you elect to not evacuate, then you need to plan on being on your own for 3 days after the hurricane strikes. So have plenty of food, water. Go ahead and fill up your car with gas in case you want to, once the storm has passed, take your car outside and charge up your cell phone. Again, please don't have your car running in your garage. Obviously, the carbon monoxide would not be a good thing. We want any casualties or anything happening after the storm has already passed. And to be honest, based on statistics, more people do actually get injured a lot of times after a hurricane has passed by just trying to clean up the yard debris. So keep that in mind that the storm dangers don't end once that storm has passed over. All right, so that's kind of the latest right now. I'm going to have another update later today when we get a new set of model runs coming in. Again, use the Hurricane Center and local officials for your guidance, but that's kind of the latest of what I think is going to happen at the moment. All right, guys, everybody stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you later today. One final note, if you have any interest in me doing kind of a question and answer type of thing, let me know. Zip a note or click that like button, and I'll see that you're interested in that, and that's something that I will do. All right, guys, we'll talk to you later today.